Hi, everybody. This is Heather Lockett with Lasting Conversations, and I am with the boundaryless, amazing, effervescent, phenomenal Nancy May. And I'm so excited that she's here. She has returned from our visit. Last time was in October in episode 106, called Family Feasts, Family, and Full Circles. So, in an interesting way, I welcome Nancy back to the table. I have gotten dressed up today. I've
Me
got
too.
more makeup and earrings and the whole bit because, as you all know, I have been traveling over in Europe, and most, if not all, of my episodes while I was away was just me in all of these different locations sharing. So I'm so excited. Here we are in January of 25 to invite Nancy back to the table, back to the camera proper, and we're going to have some more fun. So welcome, Nancy. Thank you for coming back.
Thank you, Heather. It's a delight to be here, and I've loved watching your adventures and travels all through Europe. It's been a lot of fun. It's I guess appropriate voyeurism that's allowed, right?
Appropriate voyeurism. I love it. Well, because then that'll tap into your show. Your whole thing these days, it stepped from elder care, and we talked about that just before we started recording, and into something. Well, elder care is very, very important. And yet, all of us, many of us have tapped into something. Where is it time for some more fun? And where we have that boundaryless sense of joy, and there's an importance to it. So what you're doing with Family Tree, Food and Stories, collaborating with your good friend Sylvia, is very vital. It's very important, very poignant. All the while, it steps into what is fun and silly. So since we met and talked in October, both of us have jumped off our own cliff, so to speak. Mine was the travels abroad, and we'll get into that in terms of meals and camaraderie and how they do it across the pond. And yours was your podcast officially launched. Your book officially came into print, and I see it in the background over here in back of you. And tell us more about your journey, because it feels like it's actually been lifetimes since the end of October.
Oh, I think it has been a lifetime since the end of October. Let me see. So, we moved.
So start with your podcast and the Family Tree, Food and Stories.
Okay.
Having to do with the community, the mystery around food, why it's still vital and important. And of course, we've just come through the holiday season,
Right.
which can be difficult for some and really fun for others.
Well, I think growing up, food plays such an important part in our lives. We don't necessarily realize it,
Right.
but the stories around the meals around the table, and that tradition has sort of gone a little bit. I think we're trying to get back to it. Families are trying to get back to mealtime around the table. I see that more and more. But even the little stories that happen around the dinner time conversation, whether it's breakfast or dinner or whatever it is, it's what I think it's the thread that carries through our lives right to the very, very end, literally, of what happens and what makes us who we are. Now, food doesn't make us who we are necessarily, but it's the foods that we love. It's the foods of our heritage. It's the foods of our family. It's the conversations around everything that brings such rich memories and joy to our lives in such a way that create meaning of connection. And we may think of this more as a personal thing, but we've sort of reflecting on the whole idea of the importance of food, even in your career and what that means. It's not that you're a culinary expert, but I don't know if in your early career life, if you were ever taken to a dinner or a lunch in an interview, and the interviewee, whether you knew it or not, was sort of watching your table manners, what you ordered, how you handled yourself. Were you able to have a conversation just after you took a bite of food?
Yeah.
What happens? Like, how did you treat the waiter? How did you treat, the staff around there? What else happened around that particular table that could make or break your career?
Well, what's funny about that is, and first of all, one of your episodes, I believe it was Sylvia's story, talking about having an interview process, and it was her first time at a proper dinner table,
Yes.
and the interesting thing that ensued there. So that's a good one for people to check out. Now, what you're saying is very interesting because when I worked in hospitality at the Ritz-Carlton, companies would literally book interview parties and that
Oh,
they would
yes.
have people gather around either just cocktail parties or meals. And
Mhm.
that's exactly what they were doing. So they were doing these stand up parties, and these applicants would never touch. They might have a drink of some sort in their hand, but we'd pass around hors d'oeuvres. No, no, thank you, because they're terrified because they are on the spot being interviewed in these group settings. And then sometimes it was about meals. And then we would listen in. Everybody would go back home. And then the core corporate people, with this one company in particular, they were brutal because then they would sit at a big table with everybody's resumes and tear them a new one. Say, well, this one was great. This one sucked. But yeah, this one chewed their mouth open. So you're not wrong in that whole where food can become very stressful, actually.
Yeah. And that's
Yeah.
too bad because we
Right.
should be
This was back in
comfortable.
the 80s. This was back in the 80s where
Oh, right.
everything was stressful. And that they literally called it the go-go 80s. And
Yeah.
so that was back in the 80s where everything was really not as even the companies aren't quite as brutal, I don't think, these
Well, and I
days. Yeah.
remember they were bringing in like etiquette coaches,
Yes.
what
Yep.
fork to eat with. And
Yep.
I find that so sad
Right.
that a family member and a parent never taught their children that.
Well,
We were
true.
always taught, forks, the smallest fork from the, outside in is where you eat and where things are placed and where the bread goes and where the glass goes and where the water goes and your salad goes. And so you don't end up eating somebody else's. But
Right. No, that's my bread plate.
right,
That's my bread.
B and D, that's how you sort of remember bread and drink kind of thing. But it was interesting to see that. But it was that was part of our lives. And my mom
Right.
grew up fairly poor, and one of her stories was that she remembers going to dinner at a boyfriend's house in high school. And in their house, they always picked up chicken with their fingers. Well, she was afraid to do that at the boyfriend's parents' house. And so she didn't know how to eat chicken with a fork and knife. But she was very proper and she was very, careful. And at the end of the meal, her boyfriend's mom said, I have never met anybody who's been so delicate and so polite with chicken and a fork and knife. And my mom's like, I guess I did it. Okay. But she told that story so many times to make sure
Right.
that we knew how to handle ourselves at a meal table, right?
Right. And it is important. I do think it's important to lay the basics and keep the food in your mouth, not snacking it around. That's
Or
a
what happens
giant
if
pet peeve. Yeah.
or what happens if like the piece of steak goes flying across the table, like oops.
Oops.
Just
Well,
like
then you
a
deal with it.
faux pas, right? It all
Right. Right.
happens to
It does
everybody.
all happen. So tell us some of your. I was listening. There are some amazing stories on your podcast show that you guys get into some history. You research some things. You get into some of the personal vignettes that we were just talking about, and then there's some funny things like the gingerbread house and reusing them. Tell us something about that. What do we do with an old gingerbread house?
Well, actually, it's funny because my husband doesn't listen to the podcast unless we're on the road, and so we were listening to the other day, and he's my toughest critic, and he said that was really good. I learned something. It's like, oof, I passed. But we were talking about like, what do you do with an old gingerbread house, right?
Right.
Over the years, I'd always wanted to make one, and as kids, we tried to make them, and they were like a mess. But you can buy those kits now in the grocery store.
Yep.
So a couple of years ago, I guess it was last year or the year before, I bought a bunch of them in different styles, and I thought, well, how bad can it be? It's a kit. I can't fail, right? At least they try not to. So I made all these gingerbread houses for a party that we had. And then think, now what do you do? Like all that work went into it. I don't want to like to chuck it in garbage. Like it seems like a waste of food, right? So I took them over to the neighbors' kids, and they're like, "Oh, like what do we do with this?" Okay, so I'm giving them leftover food, old cookies. But there are some traditions that the Swedish do. So the Swedes and the Scandinavians actually burn their gingerbread houses, which I think is kind of fun. Although I wouldn't try those pyrotechnics inside. You might want to do it outside on maybe
Yeah,
New Year's Eve when you burn the logs, whatever you got. Florida is big for fire pits
that's right.
on New Year's Eve. So as you know that. And then be creative, so you can take it and smash them and create what do they call? I'm thinking it's a cheese brain cramp. Not enough coffee this morning. There's the food thing, right? So, but smash them and crumble them up like you would a graham cracker crust for a pie or a cake or something like that. Even the filling inside of a cake that you might want to add with the icing. I'm thinking. Carvel, like the little cookie crumbles.
Yep.
Well, make it gingerbread, right?
Right.
Or even put them into ice cream or mix-ins, or I don't know, put the crumbles on top of your granola in the morning for
There you go.
breakfast, and
Right.
just get creative. What you can have some fun with it, and so that's there's some ideas of what to do with gingerbread other than burning it, burning down the house.
Well, I love that you just used that word creative. And one of the things there was so much with my trip where I began in Paris. So talk about food and culture, creativity, etc. And there was a couple of photos that I sent you because you were the first person that I thought of in this little window vignette of a kitchen's house. I mean, a little kitchen shop. Because what hit me immediately was the notion of savoring, of slowing down.
Right.
And maybe in the US, if we have been on the road and meals are in cars, or you're saying that the sit down meal might be taking more of a comeback these days. Plenty of people have beautiful kitchens, but they never cook in them.
Right.
So it was a reminder of, the process of how they enjoy their food. They enjoy cooking the food, and the people that are, grabbing their croissant or baguette at lunch, they are taking that time to take a lunch break. And then, of course, in Spain, some places even close up, that they still will stop midday to enjoy their day, to enjoy their food. And the same thing, the ingredients are amazing. The cultural, what's been brought into each pot or each meal, and then from around the world is fascinating. But you can tell that they're meant to sit and enjoy and talk to each other. There are no TVs in restaurants. There are no TVs. Maybe there's a sports bar where there's football, aka soccer, but for the most part, you are meant to enjoy. You're meant to talk to each other.
Right.
It was very engaging with each other, and to slow down. And it's not tipping culture. So the waiter's not waiting for you to leave to get to the next table.
Right.
You can stop and enjoy and have your flavor. And of course, all the rest of the stories can unfold and who you might meet along the way.
Stories of meeting
right?
people at restaurants in Europe, absolutely. And just even how they display food in the stores, in the grocery stores, in the little markets is so different than it is here in the States, right?
Yep.
It's an art form. And I remember I took a trip with an international group of women at the end of a conference with my mom, and brought her. She came along because the women would bring all their daughters eventually as they were, becoming young adults in their professional lives. And I don't have kids, so I asked my mom one day, I said, "You want to come?" And I thought she'd think, let me think about it. She didn't even miss a heartbeat. I'm there. We went to Italy, to Rome, and during the Amalfi Coast, she had gotten tired with her, walking around. We were like hiking everywhere. And I took a side trip, just walking around the town as she sat with a tour guide in, I think it was Sorrento. And just up and down the little hills and the streets, I found this restaurant that was about ready to open. And they were putting ice out on it was not a table, but sort of a shelf that hung off the wall. And they were putting their food out there. They're showing the fresh vegetables, what the meal of the day, the fresh catch of the fish was. And I was just like, oh my God, this is a painting. It's absolutely gorgeous. Think of all the food that's painted in the Louvre, right? These beautiful paintings that are so famous of food. Well, this was a live painting. I was looking, this is the way I looked at it. And I'm taking pictures on my phone, and the guy comes out and says, would you like to have lunch with us? And I said, no, I'm not, I can't. Like, my mom's back here. I'm going to go have lunch with her. But this is just exquisite. And he got so excited. And he said, would you like to meet our chef? And I said, oh my, I would love to meet the chef. So the chef comes out with a fresh tiramisu, and I'm trying to find that. I can't find the picture. I wish I had it. And the guy, the maitre d', takes a picture of me with the chef and his fresh tiramisu outside of this restaurant. That was just exquisite because of, the importance and the pride that they had in displaying the ingredients that they were using. It was just, to me, that's the creativity, the art, and the joy of being able to serve people to a level of engagement and enjoyment, right?
It's so true. And I was actually in London. I met up with an old friend of mine who actually had gathered other friends of hers and mutual acquaintances. And we went into actually an Italian restaurant, fish restaurant. And I haven't been to Italy as a 60-year-old yet. I've been when I was much younger. But to your point, the meal did that thing when not only was it presented, but even within the ordering of it. And one person who's been in Italy and speaks Italian, they loved that whole interaction. And then the food was laid out, and it's visually it was beautiful. And then you take the bite, and I had the tear. Oh, because you can just feel it. Everything that you're talking about, the love that goes into it, their apprenticeships, their time and energy
and
that they've taken. And it's not fussy.
With the needles and the, putting the flour on top of everything that was so posh. It's not. It's just beautifully and richly presented in such a way that it's a gift to the customer, right?
And it's not fussy. I'm glad you said that. That's why you go into a bakery, a quote unquote simple bakery. Well, their artistry in the middle of the night when they're doing their thing comes through with the croissants, the things that. Sorry, US, it's not the same. But I know a lot of people here are trying. They really are. And the farmers markets and the people that are taking great care to source their food as organically and healthily as possible, and to put in their artistry. So it does happen here in the States. I think what's interesting is that it's so culturally present every day in the other countries versus having to find it here. So that said, let's get into your book. Well, I'm going to segue into, it was fun and beautiful to be on the road. And I had Thanksgiving. I made a kind of an interesting Thanksgiving in the middle of southern Spain, where I was in an area that there weren't Americans around at all. There were Brits and other people. But I found there had been this one little restaurant that had a maple pecan tartlet. So I had a coffee and a maple pecan. I called that my pecan pie, and streamed in the end of the Macy's parade. So I had a beautiful Thanksgiving. And then I was talking to my daughter, and I knew I'd be coming back to the States, and she had decided to host Christmas Eve dinner at her apartment. And as she was saying, now, Mom, I'm going to need this, and will you help me with that? I got so wonderfully emotional because I missed being in a kitchen. And I missed that hum, which gets into your book, of what the hum of the kitchen, the hum of a household, or even a restaurant if you're there. But to be in that space, to create your table. On one of your podcasts, you had mentioned about him. Geez, I probably shouldn't have listened to Martha Stewart, but darn good old Martha Stewart, with the idea of you fluff your table, you add the flowers, you add something to your plate, and you add some beautiful ingredients. And I learned a lot from her as well. And it was so fun to be in my daughter's home. And this was her first time dressing a table. But she said to me, Mom, I know how to do this because you taught me. So that she had been when we would have company, and I would bring out all the china and the glassware, and I would dress a whole table. So it was so fun to be with her, to literally rearrange the furniture in the little apartment, and move this and move that and set the table and roast a chicken. Now she did all the ingredients and did all the stuff, but
Right.
we had that hum together.
And it doesn't need to be fancy, right?
And it wasn't fancy. It wasn't fancy, but it was fun and delightful.
Yeah.
And this is where your book comes into play, because there was a couple there, then they're just acquaintances. But I knew that your book, that is your podcast, brought onto the page was the perfect gift to give them. And they loved it. To bringing back into having the family tree, the food and the stories.
Yeah.
So tell us more about that, because this is where we can cultivate and write down almost like a journal, whether we pass it on to our kids or as a friend, but just as our own memory bank, to go through the memory bank of our lives and different meals, or if there's actual recipes. Tell us more about the actual journal that you have in the back that we can see there.
Sure. So it's really designed to be a book of memories that you can share and keep or pass along. And it doesn't need to be a gift or something that's done only at the holiday times. In fact, it may be something that you want to carry around with you for a while and just say, hey, I've just had a wonderful experience with a group of friends who I've just met. And this is what we ate. And this is what, I love the meal. So ask the chef for the recipe for it, right? And write the story, or get everybody else to contribute a line or something that they want to add to it. Kind of like, an Airbnb. If you go to Airbnbs, they leave the guest book out. Wouldn't it be fun to have everybody just write their one little segment about that particular experience that they had with you? So it can be that. But what we've done is we've created a book that is like a journal, as you said, that shows people how to collect stories around recipes and moments that they've experienced over the course of their lives, or maybe even just last week, and to hold it, and cherish it for time to come. And now you've got a way to go back and use those again and again. And even if it's not the most perfect thing, it's okay. It was the thing that you experienced at that moment that made that particular conversation, that meal, that gathering special. And it doesn't need to be in your kitchen. You don't need to be a cook. In fact, one of our most ardent fans said originally when she heard about it, I was like, oh, I don't cook. I don't cook. So she gets a copy of the book and she starts looking and she goes, oh my gosh. She's like filling this out. She's sending them to friends. She's asking stories. And she's just gotten apparently a collection of her mom's recipes that now she's remembering. Oh, I remember when Mom did this for my birthday, or remember when this particular occasion. And she's writing those recipes that were in her mom's book and her own memories of what was included. And they don't need to be grand. So I'll share one story that I have that I think I put this in the book, because there are little story vignettes throughout the book that are other people's stories, so that you kind of get a way to not just look at a blank page, but some fun triggers. And it becomes fun to read beyond your own things. And there's also little quotes at the bottom of every page too, which are kind of food related and fun too. But I, as a kid, wanted to learn how to bake bread. This is, well before COVID. And my mom was not a baker. She was a bake, boil, and broil. And if you want to bake, it's bake food, baked chicken, boiled or broiled type of thing. And if you wanted to make something sweet, it was Toll House cookies. Read the recipe on the back of the bag, right? Which is okay. Right. But she had no idea about yeast, and I didn't know about it. So I'm trying to make this bread. And every bread I made was about 20 pounds. They were doorstops. They were doorstops. And my dear dad would always, I like to bake because it was a creative thing for me as a kid. Sure. I enjoyed, that was my form of, coloring in the kitchen.
And did you do it from the scratch where you have to let it rise and then you punch
it?
The
whole nine yards, right? I didn't know what I was doing. I couldn't figure it out.
Right.
So I get to one loaf that looks like it's pretty good. It's not quite 20 pounds. It might be 10 pounds. And my dad is like sawing away, trying to get Isaac's warm, like the hint is sawing away at the edge of the loaf, and he cracks the knife in the loaf.
Oh my God.
And we all laugh. And he says, it smells really good, and maybe it'll work out better next time. But he'll gnaw away on it, maybe with a little extra milk if you dunk it in extra butter. No, this was not going anywhere. So I did eventually learn to make bread. Thank you, King Arthur flour. And
Yes.
I say some of it is in the flour, and that made the difference for me. And so, yeah.
Oh, that's really funny. And so I love those types of vignettes as well. And of course, you're reminding me, I have a friend of mine, actually the one that I met in London. For the longest time, that would be a monthly. She would bake bread, take a whole day.
A lot of work.
To do a lot of work, and then would freeze it. But oh my gosh, her bread. And I think she did learn some of that from her own mom. But there is something to the art of making some loaves of bread, and then you can just eat them up with some good butter and call it a day.
I have another friend who doesn't cook at all. I mean, she's got this she's originally from Italy, and he's like, what, Italians don't cook? I mean, come on, right? So she's got this machine she's got somewhere from Europe, and it just tells you like what the ingredients are, and you put them in at certain times, and then at the end, the coq au vin is done or the bread is done, and she makes the most delicious sweet sourdough bread. And she bakes like 6 loaves at a time in this machine, bakes them up, takes a couple of days because of the process and the proofing and everything else, and the rising of the yeast of the bread. But she gives them away and freezes them. And like Laura, I'm sorry she's not here in Florida because I want that recipe. I think I need the machine to do it, though, unfortunately.
Right. Yeah, some of those machines are fantastic.
Right.
So the other thing that I love when you were saying it, not only does it not have to be fancy, the things that go into this journal or the memories that are evoked, is that I know in our family with my kids and my mom, we had this road trip on Christmas Day. And all of us ended up being starving, and we needed a pee break. And somewhere in Carolina, nothing is open because it's Christmas Day.
Massachusetts is the same way.
Nothing is open. Yeah. So not only did we somewhere off the road somewhere was a gas station. So not only did we have to quote bite the bullet and what kind of gas station to use the bathroom,
one,
but Christmas meal, because we were also pretty darn hungry, were in from the freezer section of this little side of the road, not a 7-Eleven, mind you, but a side of the road gas station, in these packaged burgers and chips and stuff. Well, it went down good because we were hungry. And then my kids, we subsequently said, that's the funniest Christmas dinner we've ever had. Right. So that would go in the book. The craziest Christmas dinner from the side of the road, but it all counts as that was Christmas.
And then the recipe section, like, where was it, right?
Right. Yep, exactly. So we appreciate the sustenance that we can get wherever we can get it.
Well, and some of those roadside restaurants in the South are really wild. I remember one that my husband and we were traveling down to see my folks and driving down from Connecticut, New York area. And I thought, oh God, I never want to do this trip by car again. And we couldn't find a place. We were hungry. No reservation. We finally found something, I guess in the Carolinas, somewhere, Southern Cal. And it was a crab shack next to a crummy little motel we were just tired. So we just got the hotel.
Yeah.
And the ratings were good, but it was really kind of grungy and dirty. And then in the middle of the table is this hole. And it's this giant garbage can. It's in the middle of the table under those. And you you throw your trash. And then I was like, oh God, there were flies. I'm like, oh God, I really want to eat this.
Really?
So every time we see, something that's a little like, remember the place with a garbage can hole in the middle of the table? And you just like the waiters and waitresses just like, okay, thank you very much. And it went like, could you like remove that before we sit down? Maybe I'm like a little too fussy. But I prefer not to have flies with my meal. Thank you very much.
Wow. Well, that's
maybe I need an extra beer.
That's a new one. Oh my gosh. So Nancy, let's talk about So from October and the birth of the podcast, the birth of this book, how have things been going? Do you have your, and I guess maybe I'm thinking of it in terms of my own show, things are morphing, things might
Yeah.
change. We're at the dawn of 2025. That things still get to birth and evolve. How's the show been going? How has this been touching your heart or those of your listeners or the purchasers of your book? Because I
You
know we
know,
have ripple effects. I've talked a lot about the
right.
ripple effect, and sometimes it just takes the one that you can literally maybe change a life, and people have really appreciated. So I know your book landed, and they've been so touched. And
Yeah.
that's only the first one I've sent out. So tell us about how things are with your show, with your book, and your feels so far of 25.
Oh, well, the opportunities I think are huge, in a good way to have be fun and creative and really hear what other people are doing. And the show is going great. We're learning, Sylvia and I sort of learning to get our groove together. It's a combination of we call the banter back and forth. We have a couple of guests along, and also what we call the, very tiny little short episodes where Sylvia has a story or I have a story that we share. I did one I think it was I think I dropped the day after Christmas on what do you do with your leftover Christmas tree?
Mm-hmm.
Well, you eat it, of course. So there was really, literally, we had my husband and I had done a food foraging trip. It wasn't trip, like an excursion locally here in Florida. And they took you around this battleground and they showed you what you could eat in the wild. And one of the things were pine trees, pine needles and whatnot. And so, like,
Yeah.
maybe we can take that to the Christmas tree. So there was a lot more that was going on in even before that episode. I have to do another, round two.
Right.
Do you have more than one Christmas tree? There are a lot more that you could do, from like pancakes. I didn't add pancakes, pancake flour that you can put in there, all sorts of things. So, and that, yes, there is a caveat at the end saying, please make sure you don't do this if you have an artificial tree. It's like a little, well, I guess we all have too much plastic in our meals anyway.
I
So
was
right.
That's so funny. I wasn't expecting you were going to turn that. I was thinking of, be mindful if you have a pine allergy. But no, you went right to
Oh,
the
no, no. Yeah,
plastic. Do not do this
for
if
the
you have.
plastic, right? Or the tin. But yeah, no, there are certain trees that types of pine trees that you really don't want to chow down on because they are a little toxic. So, as I said, you don't want to make an extra run to the bathroom. Oops, or the
Right.
emergency room. So, so that's been a lot of fun, and the reactions are great. Getting it out there, that's sort of taking us a little bit more time. To
Mm.
be honest, if Sylvia moved, I moved. There's a whole lot that's going on. She's in a transition with a restaurant that she's owned for 25 years, and what's going on there. And
Oh, wow.
but yeah, so there's a lot that's happening between her life and my life, and but it's all good. It's all good, and just sort of allowing ourselves the space to say, you know what, it's okay. It's okay. We don't need to be perfect every single time. But I have to say, the show's pretty good.
The show is wonderful, and actually, I really appreciate that you were saying this because these last couple of months, I know the messaging for me was essentially take your business brain off, be in
It's
part of the
hard.
world, have life happen. And you guys are doing the same thing. You got to move, you get to create yet another home. And Sylvia, she's doing the same thing. The notion of transition has been this theme
Mm-hmm.
in the last couple of months. And so I love that that was happening for you guys because the business, everything from heart will continue to take off. And, hopefully lasting conversations will be morphing and blossoming into even more also. But you guys have birthed and babied and
Yeah.
taken your corporate wisdom, et cetera, to the two avenues so far.
Right.
Maybe you have even more avenues of what you're doing. With the book and the podcast show
Well,
to
we're looking at
really,
other products and
yeah,
programs to do. So there's going to be a lot more that's going to come down the road, including, we're looking at a membership, some other books and things that we can add to people's lives that are maybe a little different than this one, but that can be fun and engaging and,
right.
really, how do you add more richness to your life in a way that we might not even expect? So that's kind of fun.
Exactly. That's where I was about to lead. And I love that you just jumped right in there in terms of not only is it fun as a business, but really to have it rich and engaging for other people to find their own fun and richness. And so here are some fun tools, whether to get back to slow down and enjoy a meal, to enjoy a conversation or have a conversation with somebody else. Maybe you just met them at a diner, at a restaurant, and or even within the people in your house. When's the last time you sat and you talked to somebody in your own household? So the things that you guys are doing, which is that invitation
Mm-hmm.
to share and to maybe have some great memories, and most importantly, create new memories.
Well, and so many, talk about the business aspect of it. So many deals go down. I mean, in a good way, not necessarily
Right.
down in a bad way, but they go down in a bad way too. At a diner over a cup of coffee.
Yep.
I mean, twice I was asked to join a board of directors just because I was having a conversation with somebody, and
Yeah.
they were real. I mean, we connected from personal conversations. I mean, one CEO, I remember sitting and chatting with him, and his company was going to go public that next day, and we're in New
Mm-hmm.
York. And we talked about his mom. We talked
Mm-hmm.
about my dad and his parents. And I don't know how we got on the conversation, but we laughed. And he just said, I love you. Would you join my board? Like, oh, I wasn't going there, but let me think about it before I say yes, because better to sort of do a little investigation before you jump. But that was
Right.
interesting. And then another fellow I remember having a conversation with. Sadly, he just passed. It was Dick Parsons, who was chairman of Citigroup, and I remember seeing Dick, not knowing, I mean, not never meeting him years before, where he was across at a breakfast club that I was with a lawyer. And he's sort of looking across the table, looking across the table at each other, and just kind of smiling in a friendly kind of way, not necessarily a weird kind of way. And he was mentoring a young woman, and I'm trying to pay attention to this lawyer that I really wasn't interested in talking to, but it was his ticket, so all right. And then meeting Dick later on, and having lunch with him in a very casual setting, and he was just great. We talked about family, we talked about food, we talked about life, we talked about business. And it was just being able to, I think, be real. And if you're
Mm-hmm.
comfortable at a table and around food and around people, the food and the conversation allow you to just sort of take that edge off and not have to, if you're in a business situation, pitch or sell. It's just get to know the person a little bit more about who they are.
Right.
And it's that interlude that allows you to do that. So it's very interesting to see how food plays such an important role in our lives, from birth to death. Literally, the episode of my dad's last request for what he wanted on his really, he was dying in
Mm-hmm.
hospice a couple of days before he passed, and I didn't know, but it's stuck in my heart and in my memory that that's important too.
Right.
From the porringers that he had, that I still have, that my mom gave me, and the bunny dishes that I had as a kid that she gave me, and we do
Right.
that with our kids, right, and our family, and that's an important part of, I think, the color of our lives. Let's put it that way, right?
I love it. The color of our lives, and
Yeah.
that's very enriching. And it can be the food itself, but it's
Yeah.
truly in that moment that we can share with another person, with ourselves first. That whole thing of stopping and enjoying a moment versus rushing. But as you were saying, having one of these organic, impromptu moments to be real with someone. I love that.
It's what happens between courses, between bites, right? And it's interesting because at the end of the book we have a little family tree structure, and I share my mom's family tree and some of the little pictures of food that related to her family,
Mm-hmm.
and then there's a tree structure, so you can fill out your own. And the two last pages are graces. Some people still say grace. So, what are the graces that you might want to say at a dinner table to say thank you for just bringing not just the meal, but the people that you love and care about together. And also gratitudes, gratitude for I think gratitude is kind of a word that's overused. Maybe it's a word we should use as appreciation, and just catching a moment, the memory that is important to you, that either might help you catch your breath or take your breath away.
That's so perfectly true. And to appreciate, the hands that have made this, and the people at this table, or the animals who have given of themselves, all of those things.
Or where you might laugh and the milk goes through your nose, right?
Yeah. I love it. And Nancy, this is why I love you, because the New England smart ass comes out, which we share, right? Because you have this amazing way of zinging one in, and I love it. So this is,
never know, right?
we got all zen and so grace filled, and then bam, the milk has to snot right out.
We've all done that, right?
We've all done it.
Soda, and it burns. Like, oh my God, don't do that.
Right. Because sometimes you do have to, appreciate the gas station frozen burger, or you appreciate, the fart in a church, or whatever it's going to be, right?
Whoopee cushion. Oh, that was really the whoopee cushion.
Yeah. Whatever it's going to be, this is what makes the world
Grandma's
go round.
Beans.
Grandma's beans. That's exactly. Oh my gosh, Nancy, this has been so fruitful and delightful. Do you have any other last nugget you'd like to share? I know I'm about to ask you where people can find you and get your book, but is there something else of your heart you'd like to go ahead and share?
I just say appreciate the moments that you have, whether it be from a professional perspective, or with friends or family, or somebody who you've just gotten to know. We're in a new house now, and we're just getting to know people in the neighborhood. Well, it's kind of not a neighborhood. It's a rural strip of a road, right? And it was like anywhere from 100 acres to 40 acres, and we have 6 acres. So it's interesting to see how people are taking care of one another. And the group of these folks get together every Saturday night at the local club, and they all want to know what's going on with one another and how they can help one another. So I think and it's all over a meal. And it's kind of fun to be able to do that and share and just chill out and relax and say, hey, you know what? It's okay. We all got to eat sometimes, right? And there's always a story with it.
And there's always a story, and life happens. But I love that you've landed into a community. The one, the type that people want to engage. So
it's not an HOA. Not that people don't. I mean, I'm not an HOA person. Like, I'm so done with HOAs. It's not my thing. Put me back, throw me out in the woods, and we see deer sitting out our front kitchen window, which is kind of cool.
Wow.
I hope they don't eat my plants, because we're going to be planting olive trees. We'll find that one out.
Oh, Nancy, thank you so much. So now tell us where to find your book, and more about the podcast, and where to find you if you're online and social and all those fun things.
Yeah, well, we have an Instagram page. It's at Family Food Stories on Instagram. And if you want to hear the podcast, you can go to podcast.familytreefoodstories.com, and you just type in Family Tree Food Stories. You'll be able to get it at literally any location on the internet there. We'll be building a YouTube channel, but that's still a little raw yet, but we'll be getting there. Facebook, it's also, Family Tree Food Stories. There's 2 pages. There's a group that's open to anybody to join. And then there's the regular sort of, I call it the business page, where we do postings of what's going on. But, I haven't taken it to LinkedIn yet. We'll see if the rest of the world is ready to chow down on LinkedIn. It's like, I think everybody's a little kind of uptight there, and I know.
I don't know. That could be.
We'll teach them to loosen up. Actually, one of the more interesting reactions I got to a post years back was, I think it was around Veterans Day. And they showed a photo, posted a photo of my grandmother and me. Now, we weren't together, two separate. No, my grandmother died when I was about 7 years old. But my grandmother was wearing a World War II Army uniform, and she drove a truck in Long Island to help support the war. And so the reaction was really interesting to see how people responded to something a little bit more personal. So we'll see if they're up to that or not.
And they might. And your book is on Amazon, and
Book is on Amazon. Yeah, we've got a 5-star rating, so I'm very happy with that. We hit a bestseller, on our first day out, so that was good too. And it's not just for holidays. It's not just for a gift. It's something to be enjoyed, but inviting a new member to your family, the birth of a child, the holidays,
housewarming gifts. Yeah.
Yeah. Our realtor bought a whole bunch of them.
I was just about to say, for realtors,
she's like, oh my God, this is fabulous. This is so different than anything I've ever done. And because you want a house to be a home. And the best place for it to start to be a home is in the kitchen, right?
There you go.
Yeah.
Well, what a perfect place to end this particular conversation. It's just, this kitchens are the heart of the household.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. Nancy May, thanks again for being here with us. And here's to 2025. Here to all Yahoo!
Chow down.
Chow down. I love it. And savor. Those are the two things. Savor, have fun with your food, and have fun with the people that you are with. So once again, I appreciate you, and I appreciate Sylvia, your partner on this show. And I appreciate all of you listeners from Lasting Conversations. Please be sure to like, follow, share, review this and so many other conversations. This is Lasting Conversations. We get to the heart of everything.